So it was published in 2019. It's been a while, and it raised quite a few relevant questions, which were relevant then and are relevant even today. We have answers to some, and to some others, we still don't. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to the book discussion today, Institutional Change and Power Asymmetry in the Context of Rural India, authored by Dr. Amar Patnaik, a Rajya Sabha member from Odisha, representing Biju Janata Dal and also party's national spokesperson and head of the party's IT wing. Lesser known fact that he was also a civil servant from Indian Audit and Accounts Services, credited with designing sustainable livelihoods models for farmers through efficient and effective marketing of their produce as director of the Agricultural Marketing and Cooperatives Development in Odisha. That perhaps explains where the detailing in the book comes from. I find it well researched, a unique addition to the existing body of knowledge, coupled with deep primary research based on Dr. Patnaik's own field experience. And what I find is that it is a literature from 5 broad academic disciplines: organizational theory, sociology, psychology, economics, and political science. So my congratulations to you. The book explains how to bring about institutional change and foster new institution building by resolving power inequities in a rural ecosystem, and advocates the identification of an appropriate institutional champion to make this happen. So Dr. Patnaik, what exactly was the thought process behind this book? Where did you draw your inspiration for such a work? Such extensive research that you ended up doing, not only from the perspective of the existing literature, but by making it applied. And why do you think there is need for such an institutional champion to make this happen? So what flaws did you find, and what recipes do you suggest? So what I'm going to do is, one by one, we will, after Dr. Patnaik has spoken, we will move over to the participant panelist, and I'll make an introduction and then involve you into the discussion. So right now, I may hand over the mic to Dr. Patnaik.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gulsharan, and thank you so much for all the distinguished panelists who have been invited and who are here. Pleasure and grateful to all of them for taking some time out to review the book and have their thoughts on the same. As the question to your question as regards about this and what was the inspiration? In fact, the first chapter of the book itself talks about the motivation behind it, and the motivation behind this that I share with you is something very contemporary even now, and that was the issue of paddy procurement then, and the still complex issue of paddy procurement which exists even now. The same issue which happens every Kharif and Rabi season in many of the rice procurement states in the country. So I was director of agricultural marketing then, and I remember within a few days of my joining the government, there was an assembly session. The government faced a no confidence motion from the opposition for non-procurement of paddy from the farmers, and the farmers had gathered together on national highways in the entire western belt of Orissa because the paddy was not being sold. Then I talked to people, and there was a lot of discussions. The chief secretary and all of us, we went in the state plane, visited all these sites, understood this issue, talked to the collectors. And so we realized that the main issue was the FCI was procuring agency at the time. It said that the paddy was not up to the standard, what we call as the fair average quality, and therefore they were not procuring it. So since the problem seemed simple, so I thought the simple solution is to clean the paddy. And this was already happening in Punjab. This was happening in some other states. So I said, okay, I visited many of those states, and we installed at 16 places paddy cleaners, what we call as paddy cleaners. They were huge machines, and they could actually clean paddy and give it to the FAQ standard to the FCA so they can buy. Now, after the machines had been installed in these market yards, I suddenly found that the farmers were not interested in getting it cleaned. It was a failure. And so my entire book starts with this experiment which I tried with all my zeal, and I thought I'm doing a great job. And then I found that actually in terms of implementation, the final result is that the farmers were not using it. The collectors were not using it. And that means what was happened. So that made me think, what happened? And then I went into the issues. And then I realized there are issues of non-state actors, like middlemen from whom the farmer has taken a loan, the rice millers who don't want that thing to be done. So there's a huge host of issues. Now, after understanding these, why did I fail? What was the reason I failed? So this is one of the motivations. And that made me think that, but in certain places it was working. And that is what is the situation. All my 28 years in the civil services, one would find, as an auditor, one would find that there are oases of excellence amidst disaster, deserts of failure, or the just one or two cases, but the very next village or the next town, any particular scheme would have failed. In one particular thing, it would have succeeded. There's no mainstreaming happening. So these were some of the issues which made me think why government programs fail in the field. Why they don't mainstream? Why don't we get, the size doesn't increase automatically? Why can't? Why is it that it is only succeeding in one case, not succeeding in one case? That was the inspiration in the book and for understanding the issue. And therefore, I decided that I have to do a deep, thick kind of a case study to understand where it has succeeded and where it has failed, and then try to find out what were the variables which are responsible.
Oh, interesting. Before I move on to invite our panelists, there's one more question that comes to my mind. You mention in your book various sources of power in the Indian rural ecosystem, whether it is the economic power, political, social, cultural, informational, skills, and even opportunities and capabilities. So these are a number of asymmetries, and how to reduce these and dissolve them for the common good. So what is it that you recommend?
So while the basic thing that, again, trying to understand and find an answer to the basic question, why government programs are failing in the field, why it is not replicating on its own. If there is a successful case, then why it is not, why there are only, the islands of success in oceans of failure. Why is this? There I realized that the context is most important. So therefore, I tried to understand the rural context. In the rural context, I found that there are formal institutions, of course, of government institutions, cooperatives, NGOs, so many things are there, which I have mentioned in the book. But then equally important were informal institutions. And those informal institutions, let's say in the sociological thing, in the caste system, then there are the access to, I gave an example over there, that a person who is having a tractor is powerful. And a person who knows that person, that because he can get that tractor for him, is also powerful compared to another person who doesn't know that person at all, and he even can't get that tractor. So, these relative power asymmetries were very important in determining certain things in the implementation of any government program in the rural context. And I realized these are 8 bases of power asymmetry, and I call them as the power asymmetry octagon. And these power asymmetry octagon is there. It is contextual. So if there is somebody or something which can reduce this power asymmetry, then there is a likelihood of success. And then these cases which I have mentioned in the book, of the 4 thick cases, I found that the persons which I call as institutional champions, they are the ones who could actually convene the various actions and reduce these power asymmetries. It could be, in my book, most of them are actually women, and most of them are non-state. They are not from the state, but it could actually be a collector. It could actually be an NGO. It could be somebody, but there has to be an institutional champion who will reduce these power asymmetries, and then only it will become successful. Since finding these institutional champions with certain attributes which I have mentioned, convening them together, convening all the factions they are there, and reducing this power asymmetry is a difficult proposition. Therefore, you find islands of success in oceans of failure. It automatically doesn't get mainstreamed. And I have given the example. In Ralegaon city, Anna Hazare's village, or just around, it hasn't escalated. It has been just success there. Many such examples I have given in the book. So I thought, that is how relative power inequities become important. And unfortunately, in public policy while designing schemes, we are largely concentrating on the economic power, how to do something so that it will reduce the economic power inequity without realizing that other power inequities also are there and they influence the implementation of a government scheme.
Moving on to Dr. Rakesh Sinha, who is also a member of parliament from Rajya Sabha. You come from academics, having authored a number of books and also taught political science at Delhi University and still remains a student of political science. As a member of parliament, you have adopted a couple of villages, and that too in the geographical challenged Northeast. You understand the ground level challenges more than anybody else, since you spend a lot of time there, and at the same time the aspirations of the people. So what, in your opinion, why is success in ensuring participation in one village becomes a challenge to be automatically and easily replicated in another? So what do you find are the impediments and what could be the answers?
I namaste to all distinguished panelists, and I congratulate Amar Patnaik ji. One thing which I would point out, that his undiminished enthusiasm for academics, despite in bureaucracy and politics, is really inspiring. If a political actor works hard and analyzes the things critically, goes to the grassroots, I think that would be a great help endeavor to the field of the policy formulation and implementation both. Therefore, I congratulate him for this region, and this is inspiring for all of us as a political actors. Three things are very important in this book. One, Amar Patnaik used local narratives to understand the ground problem. This is important because whatever happening with our field of rural economics, that almost all economists uses the tools, academic tools used by the Western scholars. So that there is a difference between realities of India, Indian rural realities, and the realities of Western world. So rural economics cannot be a common thing, can be used by a macro narrative. There cannot be macro narrative. So here Amar Patnaik uses a very micro issue and gives that micro issue as a credit for a motivation to write the book. Second important thing is that he also analyzes the Western scholars in different perspective of in methodology, in narratives, what they feel, and he tries to understand their mind. Third thing that he concludes, and while he concluding, he does not claim, that is very important, that this is a universal theory he is propagating. Because in India, the tragedy of economics is that we understand that society is federal. There are diversity in society. We also understand that there is a federalism in culture, there is a umpteen diversity in culture. We also understand that there is a umpteen diversity in language and politics. But we are deluded by our economic thinking that there is a one economics, macroeconomics in this country. There is no diversity. Here I would point out that when RBI changes the repo rate, it does not have the same impact in Western India and the Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand. That repo rate makes a different impact on the people's life, on market and the business class. And its implication you can understand. One repo rate gives two different kind of political results. In Maharashtra, different political results, Chhattisgarh, different political results. So we have to understand that unitary economic system is very, very harmful for the country's interest. That's why we are not in the position to create a leveling in the economic field in different places. Now I'm coming to rural economy because three things I will here point out. One, that which books narrates and tries to develop. As you are demolishing certain powers, you have to also understand. I would like that Amar Patnaik ji should develop this theory that rural economy is also enriched by rural India is enriched by the soft power, that a communitarian life. And that soft power is a power which creates resistance to a state, which creates resistance to the capitalist class to enter. That soft power should not be equated with the feudal system which is prevailing in the Indian system. So here, when we are taking the challenge of demolishing such a certain power, economic power, social power, we should give interpretation in terms of feudalism prevailing in the rural area. That comes in the form of caste hierarchy, in the form of the economic hierarchy, in the form of some kind of cultural hierarchies. One. Second important thing is that when we propose the transformation of the rural economy, we should divide India not in 3 zones, not in 4 zones, at least 108 zones. Unless until divide India in 108 zones, I have reasons to, I don't have time to explain why I'm talking only 108 zones. Why not 110 zones or 107 zones? There are regions. You go to northeastern state where I have adopted the village. So what is happening in Kalahandi? We see that this is the den of poverty. It was there have been hundreds of the research on Kalahandi, and thousands of scholars have worked on Kalahandi. But Kalahandi, I don't know what is the exact position of Kalahandi now. But when I adopted a village in Kongthong, that was completely connected with the economic process of the country. When I adopted another village near to Kongthong in Meghalaya, Mamang, then I have the only way to reach Mamang is walking. That to the mountain areas, hilly areas. So it took 45 minutes to reach walking there. No, the complete disconnected with the economic process. So what I think that a cluster of the villages should be created a one zone for development, another cluster, other zone. So this will help. What Amar Patnaik points out that when you are producing and when you are distributing, so 2 things we have to undermine. The last point I am telling you, that it is not merely the giving a right distribution to the people. That is not the solution. Solution is that while making them as stakeholders, not as a clients, till now, rural economy and farmers, before 2014, I give credit to Narendra Modi ji, also to some extent to Odisha's chief minister, some more progressive chief minister in the country, who lifted farmers and workers from the status of the clients. That state is acting like a jamindar, political jamindar. We are giving something. No. He made them, particularly Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi ji, made them as a stakeholders. So farmers' discourse, workers' discourse is a new beginning in this country, that they are conscious of their, not only they are farmers in itself, they are farmers for itself. So they are conscious of their rights and their property. What I here point out that, what we require, that farmers' land, farmers' production, farmers' cooperative society, these things are important, but more important is that while making them a stakeholder, the question of equality must remain in the mind. Because sometimes you give many things, but inequality increases. The index of inequality increases, that creates rural unrest. So rural unrest and urban unrest are 2 different things. And that's why I like this book, that this book opens an opportunity for a larger debate and scopes for the propounding new theories about the rural India. And he confines, he does not claim that whatever he found is applicable to right from Odisha to Meghalaya or Mizoram or Assam and Bengal. He talks about the Odisha. That is the beauty of the book, that unlike others, who works in a particular place without understanding the economic diversity, implication of economic diversity, they apply their theory universally at a macro level, which damages the economic process of the country. Therefore, I again congratulate him for this work. And with last word, that our motive should not be to destruct the rural India, to reconstruct the rural India. And while we are reconstructing the rural India, their culture, their soft power, their own historical life should be protected while economic development. Economic development should not be destructive to their history, society, and their own way of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Rakesh. Well said. The need is not to build India. The need is the rural India. The need is to restructure and rebuild the rural India. I'll come back to you. I have a couple of more questions for you. But in the meanwhile, let me invite Rimaji, Executive Director, Seva, which has reached out to more than 17 million women and their families across India today. Since 1989, you have pioneered revival, restoration, and innovation of rural livelihoods from district to global level, and is recognized as champion of making livelihoods for the poor women reach markets they deserve. So the champion here is the catchword, which is what even the author also refers to. So participatory democracy is the basic cornerstone of well-functioning democracy. It rests on three legs of social, digital, and financial inclusion. Includes access to everything, entitlements, payments, banking, credit, markets, and most importantly, a place for women in this. While we have improved the access to credit, how about credit absorption capacity and capacity building? We term access to credit as equal to financial inclusion, which in fact is not true. So where does the truth lie? The book also talks about champions of institution building and the access to credit. So in that context, Rimaji, I move over to you.
Thank you so much. And I feel a bit, in the midst of the scholars and, the veterans, I'm just a practitioner. And but I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. So congratulations to you, Dr. Amar Patnaik ji. Very well researched, I believe, and it brings. I think, as you were mentioning, that the motivation was your own experience of acting as a government authority. And why does the authority not be able to exercise effectively? And I think that's what is the key that took you to, the research and the book. And therefore, I think everyone working in the development sector, and that too in the rural areas, this is a must read, I must say, a very must read. As Dr. Gulsharanji was saying, that we've been organizing the rural workers since 1975. And my main focus has been organizing rural workers. 2/3 of Seva's members are rural. But I'm neither a scholar nor a researcher, but I would be just narrating based on day-to-day experience of organizing rural workers. How do you facilitate them in their fight against poverty? You start the whole discussion from the whole definition of participation, or, as you were mentioning in the beginning, that mainstreaming, why that mainstreaming does not happen, the institutionalization. And as Dr. Gulsharanji was also saying, and I think this is extremely crucial when we are talking about longer term development, or these days you hear a lot of different kinds of terminologies like sustainability and, sustainable development. And I think our experience has been that once you identify, and here you had identified the issues or the needs of the farmers, was access to market. But why were the farmers, the government officials, not using the whole arrangement that you were trying to make? And I think the focus has to be on how do you identify the needs or the issues that cut across the larger community and organize them around that. So how do you bring all the stakeholders together? And I think that's the process. And I think unless and until the government initiatives, the government programs, the government schemes invest in that process. And to your question, just giving them credit alone doesn't lead to poverty alleviation or eradication of poverty. And the very reason is that it's credit plus. And unless and until you invest in that credit plus, the absorption of credit does not happen. And I think this organizing has to be at the pace of the poor. In your case, it was farmers, or in our case, it's the women. And I think this makes the community, the stakeholders feel that their issue, their need is getting addressed. And this increases their participation. This increases the uptake of, whatever we are trying to, whether it's a water supply program, or, giving farmers access to market, or, having access to financial services or credit. And this has to be a natural, organic process at the pace. And I think very often the donors, the bilateral institutions, the government, they fail to understand this. And we try to fit it in a project mode. We want results in 18 months, in 3 years, in 5 years, and that does not really happen. So I think the sense of ownership and belongingness, that needs to be brought in all the stakeholders. And this increases, as we say, participate, they are involved at each and every stage. And the second and the most important, very often the mistake we made is we feel ke bechare, poor thing, they're not poor. Poor never want charity. I think what we have to do is create an enabling environment which equips and enables them in their fight against poverty. This only will bring mutual accountability. So I think the community then gets organized, it builds their organization. So therefore, I think the key message is that the programs or activities or interventions, or for that matter, even MFIs, and I am nobody to speak when Dr. Alokji is around, but Seva Bank, our own cooperative bank, it has taken it almost 48 years to reach, 500,000 shareholders. So I think we cannot have a pre-planned or a preconceived program and then go and try to, I would not put it, sell it or give it to the community. There cannot be a blueprint. As Dr. Rakesh, she was also saying that we do something and then try to generalize or universalize it. It has to be need-based or demand-driven. And unless and until it's a need-based, demand-driven, and, then only I think the participation, the organic absorption, be it of microcredit, be it of, market access, be it of technical services. And this then makes it having a very firm rooted institution building, which then people take it in their own arms and hands and build it up. I'm sorry, I spoke a lot, but this is my subject, and therefore I just can go on and on and on.
Well, it's very interesting. I actually, it is kind of instigating me to ask another question. Take it as a supplementary. The SHG movement in the country has been a celebrated one. But of late, the SHG formation speed has slowed down tremendously. And also, if I, share the numbers with you, the National Rural Livelihoods Mission alone, there is NPA of 2,300 crore rupees, or nearly 4%. But total loan outstanding on SHG is increased by 24%. What possibly do you find is the wrong with it, such a phenomenal institution of self-help groups?
You're asking Patnaik or me?
I'm asking you. I'll ask the same question to Dr. Patnaik as well as Dr. Mishra.
What a favorite subject, that we think that MFIs are here to solve the problem of poverty in the country. But I'm sorry to say this, and Dr. Alokji is also here. He may kill me when he sees me in person, but MFIs are an alternative career. Very often that, people have seen. And I think to your question, why the SHG movement has slowed down, it's exactly because, we're not investing in the process. unless and until we invest in the process of organizing. And I think what is really very badly needed when we talk about implementing the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, it talks about livelihoods, but it starts with forming SHGs, opening bank accounts, but where are the livelihoods? And just by having a savings account or just by giving a loan, it doesn't automatically lead to the generation of livelihoods. But you have to identify that what are the skill sets available, what are the resources available, based on which, you know, the livelihoods of women could be. And you cannot lead. Now there is a new thing of skill building. Oh, but you know, you have to make it marketable. And by the time the skill becomes marketable, the market has moved on. So you continuously go on building skills, and poor women will never have livelihoods. So then we talk about social protection. Then we talk about skill building. But I think what is really needed for the NRLM whole team, a massive team and massive funds flowing from the World Bank to the government of India, you need an exposure and a dialogue program. Every official, you know, the national team of NRLM and the state NRLMs. I like Dr. Patnaik's book because he beautifully talks about institutions. We've done amazing work building institutions, the state rural livelihood companies and the village organizations and the federations, you name them, and there are institutions and institutions and institutions. But who works on capacity building of those institutions? It doesn't happen on its own. And I think every officer needs to do an exposure and dialogue program. We do that. And you know, you stay 3 days and 2 nights with the women of the self-help groups. You understand their lives, their work. What are the barriers? Why is she not able to, you know, turn her work into a livelihood opportunity? What are the barriers? Then we design the livelihood program of that block or of that district or of that state. And we've done immense such exposure and dialogue programs for the World Bank, the FAO, the IFADs of the world. And I think one of the crucial factors is that it helps in achieving the goal. It helps in understanding and improving the knowledge of the officials, that direct lived experience. The second is that, you know, the rapidly changing realities of the lives of the poor people and the aspirations. Unless and until you experience that, living with them, we think that बेचारा ये है, उसको बचत गढ़ बना दिया, उसका बैंक account, giving 500 rupees. I mean, what are their aspirations? What is it that they want to do? And learning experience is followed by critical questioning. And I think that is what is needed when we talk about NRLM and the SHG movement. I think my only worry and fear is that these institutions ought to remain apolitical. They do need to do political action, but not become electorally active political tools. I'll end here.
Great. So, you know, that brings me to Dr. Alok Mishra. So you as a CEO and Director of Microfinance Institutions Network with 28 years of professional experience in the, rural finance, microfinance, inclusive finance, so on and so forth. Similar experience there. The microfinance also has been a big institution in the country, registering 30% growth year on year. Just as SHGs, the total loan outstanding of MFIs put together has also increased by nearly upwards of 60% in 2020. If such massive institutions dwindle, it will only perpetuate weakening of lending institutions, and the rural India will suffer. So would you agree with Dr. Patnaik when he says that the mistrust in the Indian communities is arising due to asymmetries in economic and social power?
Thank you. Thank you, Gusran. And I was listening intently to the discussions, and everybody has practically made almost all the statements which have to be made, but I will come back to my experience in this area. But before I do that, I must congratulate Dr. Amar Patnaik for a wonderfully researched book. And as an academic of from the discipline of public policy, who has worked in the field of rural finance for 28 years now, I found it very enthralling, because this is one of the critical aspects of why we say that we have to bridge the gap between India and Bharat. And I think if that gap has to be bridged, that has to be bridged through breaking the information asymmetries. And it has been wonderfully documented, and I'm happy that the first case study in the book of Thakuma is of the field from which I come from, which Rimaji has also talked about. And let me tell Rimaji that I respect your work too much, and whatever you say is very honorable for me. So no complaints on that. So now coming to this, what I have found in let me tell you, in 30 years of India's journey in rural finance and policy, what I find, other than what Patnaik ji has already said about the institutional asymmetries at the ground level, at policy level, there are two things which also Patnaik ji refers in the book, which I find very disturbing, and they often disturb the momentum of the whole program. First is, Patnaik ji, I think, has used the word institutional isomorphism, that everybody has to do it same. That is one area in which is also, Rimaji was talking about NRLM, and you also asked a supplementary question on NRLM. What is happening to NRLM? And it's a tragedy, because the whole SHG bank linkage program had thought about community mobilization, self-voluntarization, and all those things, and it was doing very well. And if I tell you one data point, that from 92 the program was launched, it worked very well till the year in the decade of 2000, when it started appearing in the speeches of the Union Finance Minister, and targets started getting announced there. The whole community mobilization program became a numbers-driven program. Number one, we have to understand that when you're talking about social capital, suppose you have to form a group of homogeneous people who have to be trained, Rimaji will understand that, and who have to be given credit to improve their livelihood, training, skills have to come. This is a time-consuming thing. You simply cannot say that I say that in this district, in next 1 year, I want 5,000 groups to be formed. You will get some NGOs who will volunteer for the capacity building grant, and they will link it, but that will not be sustainable. And everybody has to be replicated in the same way. The whole target will be divided like that. And the second fallacy which I have found is that the policy makers urge, and I also understand that urge where it comes from, the urge to replicate it faster. Suppose, like for example, in institutional space of rural finance, you will take the example of regional rural banks in 1970s. When the concept came, it was said that the committee report, if you read Narasimhan Committee's report, who later on authored the 91 reforms report, he said very clearly that first we should do some pilots. We should see how it works out, whether there is a need for it or not, and then we will scale up. But you and behold, by 1983, we already had more than 100 RRBs in the country. And you see the situation now. So we have to be patient with something. If you pilot it, and when you talk to policymakers, I understand their angst. They say that India, there's so much of challenge to do. There is a huge exclusion. We have to do fast. Otherwise, it will take 150 years, 100 years. But the problem is, I always say to them, if you do it in such a manner, the 150 will become 250. It won't become 50. You make such a beautiful progress, the social capital is built in, and then you fritter away the gains by this isomorphism, that putting it across pan-India. So that is the second thing which I wanted to say that. And in case of many government schemes, because I have been part of the central banking system, and when I see that when we government schemes, many times cooperation is also there, because cooperation adds to sustainability, and doctrines say that. But when you go to the field and you talk to the persons who were part of the process, and you later on come to find out whether it was cooperation or co-option. So sometimes it looks to me that whether it was, they were just called for and list was made that so much persons attended the meeting, this was happening. So this is another big problem in the sector. And many institutions in rural India, like SHG movement, which is now, despite so much funds flow, so much of state machinery, it is floundering, I would say, but floundering would be a stronger word, but I would say it is still trying to find its feet despite all the promises it made of livelihood building, federations and all that. And why so? One another reason is that it was a community program, the SHG. It was NGOs and volunteerism and all those were key words. But now with your NRLM, SRLM, right, going down to the block level, the machinery has been pushed down. It almost looks like a government program. And in my view of 30 years, because I have seen rural finance and I've worked across 21 countries, what I have found is that when government directly intervenes in the market, there is a problem around the corner. When the government is only limited to the role of building a favorable ecosystem, supportive role, maintaining law and order, bringing a facilitative regulation and environment, it's all good. There's enough private enterprise to go and help there, whether Gandhian enterprise or venture capital enterprise, both are there to go there. But moment you directly start intervening in the credit market, there is a problem around the corner. So this was, and that is why the whole thing that we have to be very careful about is that even if cooperation is on paper brought in, it should not translate into co-option. And if you have to do real cooperation, it takes time. We need to have patience for it. We cannot simply say that tomorrow 1 lakh groups have to be linked, though many have to be provided credit. This not have to happen. Now, your query about microfinance, I think Rimaji and we have talked about SHG program. Let me talk about the other wing of it, that is the microfinance institutions program. Now, banks, small finance banks, NBFCs and NBFC-MFIs, which are the dedicated vehicles for it, provide credit to it. And the whole sector's portfolio, as we speak, is around the credit outstanding is 2.5 lakh crores, which is a humongous amount by terms of it. And these are small loans of 40,000, 50,000. Here also the movement is going strong, but COVID has impacted. And as you were saying, they were going very steadily. But now if you see from year on year, if you compare with last year, the growth is mere 5% because the clients are under stress. Here, even in financial sector regulation, because we are basically talking about rural development, even if you take the financial sector regulation, the whole approach of being top driven, not listening to the players. Suppose I am a regulator and I am making policy for SHG bank linkage program, which Rimaji is very seasoned person involved in there. She has given her decades of life to that. I need a responsibility to talk to her that I am trying to do this. What are your views about it? Will it work there? Will it not work there? Instead of issuing a circular and then asking her to follow, and then it undoes a lot of work. And I will just give you 2 examples. Because Rimaji said about credit plus, I also agree with that mere credit is not financial inclusion. It has to be how the credit is used productively. And in NABARD days, we used to talk about credit panchasutras. So it has all these things. You have to use credit, you have to use productively, this and that and all that. But now, some people's academics say that it is a neoliberal ploy to divert from real attentions of development and only keep financial inclusion. As long as you have a bank account, as long as you have about a 35,000 loan, you are empowered enough. I don't agree to that view. But to do credit plus, you need margins. You need, see, not all will be Gandhians. Maybe somebody like Rimaji will be a Gandhian, but not all players will be Gandhian. Majority will not be Gandhian. So they need some margin to survive there. If you are so conscious of the price, subsidize them, but don't put caps on that. And that is one issue also, which is very, very potently affecting the private microfinance player. Second, in terms of financial sector regulation, let me give you an example. Specific example that last 10 days back, Reserve Bank of India has issued a circular that NPA customers, those whose loans have become overdue more than 90 days, till they clear every cent of that overdue, they will not be classified as a regular client. They will continue to have that NPA tag. Now, the entire microfinance now delivery happens with a check on credit bureau record. What it will happen, I argued with the Reserve Bank officials. I said, see, our clients are poor clients. If under COVID stress, she is not able to pay 90 days, that means 4 or 5 installments, loan repayment, she has missed it. Now for her to pay it all in lump sum at one go is difficult. She will pay 1 installment, her livelihood improves, she will pay 2 installments and so on and so forth. But if I wait for her to clear each cent and till then she has to carry that NPA tag, what it will happen is that when the other lenders will look at her credit record and see the NPA, nobody will lend to her. That will only compound the problem. this is another example when I say that when you do a policy, kindly talk to the stakeholders who have been working. Everybody wants to build India. Nobody is going against that. But if the proper consultation is done, I think many of the problems will be solved. I think I have taken enough time. I will come back to that, and maybe I digressed also from the issue. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Alok, it was quite interesting though. But yes, it leaves a couple of questions, left unanswered. So I'll come back to you. In the meanwhile, while I have to move on to Dr. Saxena, I'll take your permission to ask a small question to Dr. Patnaik. While we, between Reema-ji and Alok-ji, we discussed a whole lot of institution building, something very important to which we generally do not pay attention to is the role of civil society. Getting them to involve into the process, going back to them, asking for more, because they are the ones working at the grassroots, and we do not give much importance to these. Dr. Patnaik, in your view, how would you capture the role of civil society in the institution building?
Dr. Gusharan, actually, before I go to your question, I would like to thank, Reema-ji and Dr. Mishra, Alok Mishra, for their thoughts. Interestingly, in fact, that is the reason, having spent 20 odd years in 28 odd years, that is the reason why I started writing the book. That participation is everywhere. The literature says participation is good, participation should happen, but it is not happening. It's not automatic. You have to build. That's why I use the word institutional convening. Achha, then who can convene? I go to a village and I stay in I shout at the center of a temple that please come, I'm going to make you financially included. I'm going to make you come out of poverty. But then there is somebody like Anna Hazare goes and says, you come, we are different. And therefore, those attributes have been listed in that book, which is an exploratory work. Some of those variables or some of those attributes may be more important. To me, for example, I find the level of selflessness in the institutional champion is more important than some of the other variables, the level of embeddedness I've talked about. And that is precisely the question when he says cooperation and not co-option. That's what Dr. Mishra said. Most of the time in government programs, we just co-opt because you have to meet targets. If it is a cooperative society, how can the government make a cooperative society? It is a cooperative effort of members who should make a cooperative society. Unfortunately, we'll have those targets. So these are the issues which I think I tried my best to capture in the book. And of course, there are so many things. This area is so huge. And in fact, these micro, as Rakesh said, these micro plans, micro details, micro empowerment systems and procedures, there has to be a process, as Reema-ji was saying. But coming to a question of, in fact, drawing from this, I would say, the civil society organizations, therefore, have a very strong role in, doing this institutional convening exercise. In my book, I have mentioned that while the institutional champion and actor from the village, all the 4 cases, they were women, they succeeded in doing this. The facilitation work, the motivation work, the way forward work, the thinking work in almost all the cases was done by an NGO or what you call it, a civil society organization. Now, if the NGO comes from outside and tries to implement something entirely by actors not belonging to the village, may succeed, may not succeed. But if you are picking up an actor from the champion from the village, but he needs to, his capacity to be built, he has to be given a direction. Sometimes, in one case, for example, the lady who was trying to fight these, liquor makers, the country liquor, which they were making in Kulbani district, there was apprehension that she would get beaten up. People would come and beat her up. At that time, the NGO comes to the rescue and informs the collector the video, which the normal person, she's a tribal lady, she wouldn't have been able to do. So civil society has a very significant role to play, but they have to nurture this champion. They have to find out such champions who have these qualities and attributes and tell him or her to follow the process. And I have outlined what is that process of institutional convening. It's not easy. It takes time, as was again expressed. It is not something which is target oriented. It has to be for each particular village, each community, a different model has to come up. And that is, in fact, we only pay lip service when we say that we have been saying it since independence that we need to have every village level development plan. We haven't been there anywhere. In fact, sir is there, Saxena sir was the artist secretary. Even at that time, I remember when I was auditing the NREGA, PMY, all these kind of things, we're talking about this. At that time, the Planning Commission was talking about this. Where have we reached? When we talk about SDG goals, unless they get internalized and localized at the village level, state level in SDG monitoring, but picking out figures from the budget makes no sense whatsoever.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saxena. Without me asking you questions, you already have been given enough food for thought by Dr. Patnaik. So, would you like to answer to, whatever the questions that he has raised? We are pleasure to have you as distinguished fellow Scotch Development Foundation with us, and also being one of the senior most members in the bureaucracy, as well as you held senior positions in the government. So, would you like to answer Dr. Patnaik first?
Certainly,
but Dr. Gulsharan, actually, it was not a question. In fact, to his guidance to
I would first of all like
come
to
out with a new version, and to give his thoughts, because I know he's one of the most celebrated person who has worked in this area of public.
Let me first of all congratulate Dr. Patnaik on writing a very interesting and thought-provoking book. And I entirely agree with him that if you want schemes to succeed, then you need participation, you need people to be aware of the programs, you need village leadership, and you also need some outside agency, NGO, civil society to promote all this. But the problem here is that, of course, leadership, and as he also has analyzed, that this is not happening because of a large number of inequalities on social, economic, political, informational, cultural dimensions, etc. That's all okay. As a policymaker, then what does one do? Of course, one can say promote NGOs, and one can learn from Bangladesh. Bangladesh has beaten India on many social indicators. I think one of the most important factors has been that Bangladesh has very viable, strong, and independent civil society. BRAC, for instance, you'd be surprised to know that BRAC employs something like 90,000 people. One NGO employing 90,000 people would be unheard of in India. But they are not being supported by government. They are getting funds from maybe ADB or Civilian Agency, DFID, etc. So source of funding is different. In India, most NGOs are being supported by government, and that leads to growth of a very large number of fake NGOs. Number of genuine NGOs in India is very small. I don't think more than 5% of villages are being covered by the type of NGOs that Dr. Patnaik has seen in Odisha, and their number is very small. So therefore, if I'm in a policy-making position, and I know that it's very difficult to reduce inequality, economic inequality, political inequality, social inequality of caste, etc., that is desirable, but not so easy. But what can easily be done is to reduce inequality on information. And information is one, if we are able to provide information on a number of subjects, then you will find that participation, awareness, interest of the villagers will improve. Let me give a few examples. Look at the report on hunger, international report on hunger, and also our own report on National Family Health Survey. It clearly shows that India is doing very poorly on hunger, on malnutrition, etc. One of the reasons is that the information which flows to Government of India from the states is collected at the Anganwadi center. Anganwadi worker writes in a register, weighs the children and writes in the register. And we all know all that information is fake. It is highly exaggerated. If there are 40% children who are stunted, she will show only 1% or 2%. And that is, there is enough data to show that there's a very big gap between reported and the evaluated data. Supposing we follow the Thailand model, which is that every month there would be a village mela, and in that mela or Gram Sabha meeting, everyone would come. Anganwadi's worker would weigh all children in front of everyone, so that not only the weighment is being done correctly, but it also informs the parents that look, your child was only 8 kg last month, and she or he has not gained any weight. So therefore, do this, do that. So you would be able to make parents aware. Today in the program of malnutrition, parents have no knowledge, no interest at all. And therefore, by just doing this, you can really improve. Now that we have digital, we have internet, etc., we can easily do such things in many programs. Look at MDM, Midday Meals Program. Why don't we put information on the internet? How many children are getting midday meals? We all know if 20 children get midday meals, in the record they would show 40 or 50. And that can easily be corrected if we just provide this information. So sharing information is very important. That is number one. The other point here is that we also need to see that the panchayats work properly. Today, what happens in India is that when you call a Gram Sabha meeting, hardly anyone comes, or that Gram Sabha meeting is shown on paper. Why don't they come? Because they know that the meeting is of no use to us. Now, in India, the panchayats see themselves as representing government. They represent government to the people. They don't represent people to government. And that will happen if we just make one small change, which is make panchayats collect local taxes. Whether it is land revenue or water cess or it is house tax, if the panchayats collect these taxes, then the sarpanch will have to go to everyone's house. Please give me 50 rupees. I will ask, I gave you 50 rupees last year. What have you done? What did you do with that money? So awareness and transparency will improve if we just make the small change. Now, in Dr. Patnaik's book, in all the case studies, women are leaders. Now, women, we know that, of course, 1/3 posts go to women in panchayats, but women are still playing a very subordinate role. The main reason is, if you look at India's figures on women's employment, in the last 40 years, it has been coming down. Number of women who are in the labor force, who are in the workforce, has come down from something like rural areas, from something like 35 to 40% to about just 20%. So if women's participation in labor force is declining, and also their asset in land is not improving, you can't expect women to come up and be good leaders. India passed a law sometime in 2005. Hindu Succession Act was changed. Women were made to get share in land. It is not happening. No one is monitoring that. Ministry of Women and Child Development, Ministry of Law, Ministry of Rural Development, if they start monitoring how many women have really got share in land, that will really improve women's share. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is, by making simple changes in rules and laws, we can certainly improve participation, and one can really learn a great deal from Bangladesh. Let me give a few examples from Orissa. Now, in Orissa, you'll be surprised to know that in 95, when I visited a village in Koraput, women were prosecuted for keeping brooms in their houses. Jhadu rakhne ke liye unko jhadu, it was all seized and they were arrested, they were put behind the bars. Because at that point of time in Odisha, the rule was that you can collect hill brooms from the forest areas, but you can neither process it, nor store it, nor sell it in the market. So all these activities which will add value, harvesting, processing, open market sale, that was all denied to them. So by making again some changes here and to find out why such laws still continue, we still have a large number of bioforest products like sal seeds in Odisha or tendu patta in Odisha, which are nationalized. Now farmers are free to sell their produce to anyone they like, but they like to sell it to government. In case of forest produce, you find that women are not, people are not allowed to sell their produce in the open market. So again, it's a question of these laws. So therefore, unless we make these fundamental changes in gender and empower them, we will not be able to do justice.
So I'll come back to you, sir, with another question. No, we have time. We have time. So let's have an interjection from Dr.
Fine.
Alok here on your Bangladesh bid. He would like to say a few words. You are muted, Alokji.
Well, thank you. With due respect to Saxena ji, because I have worked very closely in Bangladesh from last 10 years, and before 2019, I was repeatedly going in Bangladesh. So let me tell that if I compare, because the sector which I know, the situation, and the sector which is most celebrated in Bangladesh is the Yunus, and post that the microfinance one. Let me tell you that, sir, in terms of service delivery, in terms of sophistication, in terms of operating efficiency and all that, we are far higher there. Second, on your the role of civil society in whatever the health indicators or overall health living indicators where Bangladesh surpassing India is concerned. While the role of NGOs, yes, I agree to that. But I also see that the tolerance towards civil society in Bangladesh, we cannot compare it with a democratic, highly pluralistic polity like India. I have seen it at the local level, seen it at provincial levels in Bangladesh. So there are quite a few bits of checks and balances. And the problem is why NGOs are having an upper hand there is because like institutions like BRAC and others, ASA and all that, they have become too big. Is that if, just to give an example, when I used to go to field areas, even in a field area like near to Sundarban, which is almost India's border, if you go to the district headquarters, like when we go to in India to any district headquarters, first we see district magistrate's office, then collectorate, then planning office, then statistical office, so many government offices. There, the main township in the center, you will have BRAC office, you will have ASA office, and you will have absolutely no signs of any government official near about that. So it looks like as if the government has vacated that space to the NGOs, and now that NGOs have become too big and they have they are all over place of Bangladesh, so their role of course will be there, but their practices and all that, not everything to be celebrated, sir. This I must say.
Yeah. So let me go back to Dr. Saxena. Add one more question to to what you were saying. You architected NREGA and several other rural development programs. On the capacity building and champion, as the book also suggests, we distinguish between the competence or capacity to meet a need. We look at the effort applied, the assurance of accountability for the outcome, and the ways in which all of these are signaled to other stakeholders. To all of the above, there is no lacking of any effort. But then, why do all these government-sponsored programs fail to deliver?
No, again, I'm glad you raised the issue of NREGA. If you compare NREGA with PMGS5, you will find that PMGS5 has done far better than NREGA, both in terms of the number of roads constructed, employment generated, etc., etc. And interestingly, if you look at interstate data on NREGA, you will find that the number, after all, the program is for rural poor. So the program has to benefit rural poor. But if you compare Bihar with Tamil Nadu, you will find that in Bihar, the number of rural poor is 6 times more than the number of rural poor in Tamil Nadu. But the expenditure in NREGA in Tamil Nadu is 3 times more than the expenditure in Bihar. But if you look at PMGS file, you will find most expenditure in PMGS file has been done in Bihar, UP, Assam, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, etc. How did this happen? This happened because I was Secretary of Planning Commission, and I insisted, when PMGSY came to us, I insisted that you just put one clause that allocation to each state would be in proportion to the number of unconnected habitations. So therefore, if number of unconnected habitations is 100 times more in Bihar than in Kerala, money will go to Bihar. After some time, they will develop capacity to do it. I kept on telling Secretary of Rural Development, please put similar clause in NREGA. But unfortunately, because I was not in government at that time, I was only a member of the NSC, they did not listen to me. If you just say that in NREGA also, it will be in proportion to the number of rural poor, states like UP and Bihar and Odisha will develop capacity and more money will go to rural poor in these states, poverty would get reduced. So it is the design of program, I think, which is very important. Look at the program of rural housing versus urban housing. Rural housing program, despite corruption, has succeeded greatly. Urban housing has not. Urban housing for the urban poor has not succeeded because we are still insisting on owned housing in urban areas. If we just say that, okay, I'm a rickshaw puller, I earn say 300 rupees a day. I can't afford a house which is costing 10 lakh rupees, but I can pay rent of 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees a month. So if we change the design and say in urban areas we will insist on rental program, which was done in Europe after the Second World War, because of increased poverty, they constructed a large number of flats and rent them out. So rental housing program would succeed in urban areas. So what I'm trying to say is, as a policymaker, you have to see why some schemes succeed, others don't. Supplementary nutrition in ICTS is a big failure. I went to a village in Odisha, in Hardoi district. People don't call it Paushtik Ahar. They call it Pashu Ahar, because everything was being fed to cattle. No child was eating it. It is known fact, but we still don't take any action because the contractor who supplies is, all the politicians are benefiting from that. Lack of if information is not being provided, it is deliberate because people benefit. The Sarpanch is not interested in providing information to the people, whether it is on NREGA housing, NREGA employment, or in mid-day meals program, because he is making money. So if it is the joint secretary in the state government or the government of India, they must insist that all this must be on the website. All this information should be available. And as I said, if you start weighing children in the open area, then this gap between the reported and the evaluated data will disappear. So by making some simple changes, it is possible to improve the implementation of programs. And also, as you all know, that we are not measuring outcomes. We spend money and we think that we spend money, it will be achieved, targets will be achieved. We don't evaluate programs, we are not measuring outcomes, I recall when I was in the planning commission, we evaluated PDS, and the report showed that 58% of PDS was not going to the right people. And we put it on the website. But this kind of openness and this kind of frank and free evaluation and honest evaluation is not being done now. That's another factor why we are not able to improve our implementation of programs.
That is quite an interesting submission. And also, what you talked about, the role of panchayats, being the representative of people to the government rather than government to people. Yeah. That again brings me to another very interesting question, which I would like to pose to Dr. Patnaik, that the panchayats actually lack the capacity to a great extent to deliver that role which is expected. And Dr. Saxena also pointed out that this is by design. So in order to, build the capacity of Panchayati Raj institutions, what is it that needs to be done? Because that is the third tier of governance.
I have very radical thoughts on this, because you see, even though by constitutional amendment, we have recognized and given them some powers under the 72nd and 73rd Amendment, or 73rd, 74th Amendment of the Constitution, and recognize them as the third tier of government, what powers do they have? Now, if you look at those three Fs, we talk about only those three Fs: functionalities, and I think resources, finance, all these issues. But the fact remains, and since now I've joined politics, I've seen it very closely. I see that actually the actual power, one is of course the collection of the taxes. The other one is, in most important powers, they're not transferred to these people. On the spacious plea, I would say that they do not have the capacity to perform those duties. I still feel that the intention to genuinely build their capacities is just not there. The Finance Commission, after Finance Commission, have been earmarking funds for the capacity building of municipal bodies as well as of Panchayat Raj institutions. But the District Planning Committee, I think this is where the structural problem is, and this has been agitating my mind for a long time. One, you have the village select its sarpanch and the members, then the Panchayat Samiti, and then the Jilla Parishad. After that, it ends. Whereas you have MLAs and you have also MPs who are coming directly through a direct election process. And they are also having interaction which is directly with the people over there about the same problems on which actually the Sarpanch and the Jilla Parishad and the Panchayat Samiti should have been thinking about it. And this is where this fissures that is coming is because of the two parallel sets of authority. So this authority of the MLA and the MPs, they do not want to cede that power. They do not want to empower the panchayats to come up to a level where they can actually exercise. Because if they exercise power, the MLAs are actually going to lose that power. And I have written in my book that some cases, while if you want to empower a community, empower a group of people, then the powerful have to actually cede that space. Whether that ceding of space takes place the Gandhian way or by force of law, by coercion, by regulation, by ensuring that it happens, or by vigilante, when people just come up and say, this is a civil movement and I take it up. Now, these are the three options available. But the programs which are meant for village level, panchayat level, you look at, let us say the most glaring example is we have reserved, in Orissa, 50% of our panchayats for women. But what happens? We call, the husband goes and sits on the dais and says ki wo panchayat ka panchayat sarpanch ka swami hai. Sarpanch in Odia mein wo sarpanch ka swami. And he is deciding this particular. So now the power has been given to them, but actual power is not exercised by them. This process, and on the again the special plea, unko kya malum hai, usko kya malum hai. But actually the problem is, if the work, I still feel there is a lot of capacity at the grassroots level. in every panchayat with the people whom we think that they do not have the capacity. They may not have the capacity to operate a smartphone or operate a web link. But you see, hasn't our the number of the tele-density or the number of people who are having smartphones, isn't it increasing year after year? Is there any training being given to these people? We have given smartphones to every women SHG group. They are using it. They're using it for availing services, for informing. So I think it is more than the I think the basic problem is our intent to transfer the knowledge and the power itself, not the knowledge, transfer the power itself to the third tier is not there. And therefore, the problem is coming, how to build that capacity. That is the spacious place, like a chicken and egg story, that since they don't have the capacity, we can't give it to them. Many efforts have been made. When I was an auditor, I remember in Municipal Corporation of Bhubaneswar, Tata TCS was employed because it was a money which was given by the Finance Commission. They developed a software, but it's just nobody is getting people to even operate that particular software. Is it not that in Bhubaneswar, people working in BMC do not know how to operate a computer or operate a software? The intention is not there.
May I just add here something?
Please.
I entirely agree with Dr. Patnaik that if you have these two groups, MLAs and MPs, and also panchayat leaders, it is not possible to empower the panchayats because MLAs don't like it. Now, if you look at our district situation, we have three kinds of people. We have government officials, collectors, etc., who have a lot of power. We have MLAs, MPs, and then we have panchayats. Now, out of these three, if you have all these three, then panchayats will never be empowered. You have to remove one of the two. Either you remove the collector or you remove the MLAs, MPs, etc.
Entirely.
Pakistan, let me also say something about Pakistan. Pakistan decided, when Musharraf was the prime minister, he decided to abolish the post of district and deputy commissioners. And he said that the Zilla Parshad, what is called, I'm forgetting the name of in Pakistan, what is called, at the level of Zilla Parshad, that chairman would be the authority to decide all the programs, etc. So the post of deputy commissioner was abolished. But what happened was, because that the Zilla Parishad chairman was indirectly elected, he was only looking after the interest of those 30-40 members who had elected him, and there was no reduction in corruption, etc. So I think present Prime Minister, the Pakistan, what's his name, the fellow. He decided to sort of again bring back the collectors. I had suggested in my paper, and when I presented this suggestion to Dr. Ramesh, was the Minister for Rural Development, I said, look, if you look at the MLAs in India, in UP, Haryana, Assam, and many states, assemblies meet only for 20 days in a year, sometimes less than 20 days in a year. So why don't we abolish MLAs? We have, about 5,000 block pramukhs. We have 5,000 MLAs. You abolish all the MLAs. Let the post of block pramukh be elected, not indirectly, directly. This fellow would do all the development work at the level of the block. And 20 days in a year, he'll go and sit in the assembly and do it. Dr. Ramesh said, yes, very good. We will consider this in the 23rd century, meaning that why this suggestion is so useless that no one would ever look at it. So what I'm trying to say is that in actual practice, having these three organs of power, district authorities, MLAs, and panchayats, it's not compatible at all.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy that I'm not. I initially thought that I was the only madman around, but I'm so happy Sarah has similar thoughts. because I'm planning to write on this. I still feel that there should be only one direct election, and that election should select the person who is closest to them, and which is at the sarpanch level. And after that, it should all be indirect, in which case we save the entire money for that we spend on holding elections to legislative assemblies. We don't need them, because they will all come. There will be a body there, but there will be no election. It will be through an indirect process. And the actual person, because if you want to take administration closest to the people, the actual person who knows what is the problem in one particular household, and then it will travel up along with a plan to solve whatever, it has to be at that level. Currently, we have so many elections. Whole year goes now, you may have the national elections and the assembly elections together, but we still have the panchayat elections. You still have the municipal elections. And that's a full exercise. And there is no gain saying that they are the ones who actually know what is the problem in the ground. And therefore, I had thought about this 3 years ago. In fact, I didn't know whether I have written it in the book, but I am currently thinking of sending some op-eds on these, because I strongly believe that this dual structure, we have worked on this for about now 3 finance commissions, and it is not working. And therefore, there is a time to think. Enough time has been given for both the structures to exist. Now they just don't deliver. You may still have an MLC. It makes sense to have eminent people from that area in that particular thing who could actually give guidance. But the direct election should be the person who is closest to the people, and that is where the sarpanch is, the gram panchayat. Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Reema ji, you wanted to say a few words.
Yeah, I wanted to say, but I would be saying something very different, and that is that we definitely need a decentralization of power and structures, definitely, and therefore, we do need to strengthen community institutions, membership-based organizations of the poor. And I think unless and until the poor themselves become the owners and managers of these community institutions, which have to be democratic, owned by the communities, they believe in collective leadership, and such organizations then succeed in political action, but they have to be refrain from electoral politics. And I think in our country, what is happening is the moment a community institution becomes strong, I mean, we are also victims of that. So that's why I'm saying you have large membership, then the political, leaders feel threatened, and they see that, this is now a political. So I think that is what, and therefore I think what we need in our country in terms of community institutions is lateral links. Community institution to community institution in the same village, across the villages, across the districts, across the states. And these links can be knowledge links, market links, supply links, risk management links, those kind of links. The second is awareness about the community institutions. I think they are only confined to social sector, but they have tremendous economic and political potential. And there has to be some way of, within the government and the private sector, about the nature and the extent of community institutions in our country. And last and the important is investments. Community institution needs sustained investment. And unless and until we do that, it will not build resilience of the communities, and then, having leapfrog development. So I think what I would really, propose is to draw a roadmap for community institutions of India. And without such a roadmap of community institutions, they will only carry the burden of the society and the economy, but will not become the driving force for prosperity and peace that Dr. Patnaik, you are referring in the book, and the op-ed that you are also planning to write. And I think we have thrown out so many such community institutions, the Seva Bank, the Trade Facilitation Center, the Agribusiness Initiative, the community learning and business resource centers. They all thrive. So I think this is what is very much needed.
Sure. Alokji.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to talk about, because if you read the book, all the power octagon which Dr. Patnaik has drawn, he also says that the gender is at the base of the power asymmetry in rural India. And from my experience of 30 years, I totally agree to that. That is at the base of it. And we have seen it in microfinance. But one problem in our development programs, which I would like to point out from experience, is when we go to the field, in 30 years, whether it is SHG or microfinance, through SHG groups or joint liability groups, a vibrant community, a silent social engineering is happening at the village level. Many things, so many case studies that G has referred to it, are born out of that movement. But what I see is that the need of the hour was that the government, various multiple schemes of the government, whether it is central government or the state government, should have used this existing nucleus to propagate it, because there was an identified community structure which was homogeneous, which was participatory, which was democratic in functioning, without bringing it into the political fold. Of course, that's because that's my opening caveat, that you should create the facilitative environment but not directly intervene into it. But that has not happened. If I go to a village, because last month I was in Ratlam in Madhya Pradesh, and 9 kilometers away from the district headquarters, and there are so many schemes. Under one scheme, some calf has been given to some person. This has been done through Anganwadi. This has been done through this program. Central government has come through directly. SHG of government. Somebody is saying, I am from NRLM SHG. I am from NABARD SHG. So all these things, time to look for that we create policy and programs with good intent, but there is a need to harmonize it. There is a need to harmonize it and use the existing demonstrated community structures and leverage their success.
No, in fact, what you're saying is very interesting, because not only need to harmonize, it gives me another thought, maybe totally out of context. Draw an analogy, 2007-8, NREGA wages were 100 rupees. And the migration just about had started towards the cities. And a whole lot of people who came to the cities, they were definitely earning more than 100 rupees a day. And also at the same time, all 365 days in a year. Meaning to say that the wages have, from 2007 to 2021, where we are sitting today, have become maybe 400 rupees plus. But otherwise, the youth who migrated from the village has gone up to maybe a few lakhs today. So meaning to say that such schemes probably have lost their relevance. They need to be withdrawn. And also, not only the power asymmetry, which is what Dr. Patnaik talks about, it has created social asymmetry. There is so much of haters between the economic status between one family and another at the village level itself, which we are not going to bridge for times to come. And as you said, Alokji, that there's this scheme, that scheme, and a multiple of scheme, plethora of them. Do we need it any longer as we move along for institution building, which is what we are talking about at the village level? That's a question. So open to you. Anyone would like to take it? Let's go to the author, Dr. Patnaik.
So I agree partially, but if you look at the NREGA scheme, which you talked about, you look at the time when we are having the reverse migration during the time of the pandemic in COVID. It was this which was the lifeline in the rural India. It created the jobs. It created whatever opportunities to at least eke out a living, and it also continues to give some kind of permanence to the fact that there is a scheme available, and it's a self-selection scheme. You may choose not to actually take it up, and to at least have a scheme in which the amount of money that is being given, which would be sufficient to take care of XYZ needs. Now, at the time when the first lockdown happened, there was nothing. This was the only thing which provided succor. But this is a self-selection scheme. So I think we should have similar schemes where there should be no targets. There should be no budgets. It should be depending on what, if the people want to avail it, those kind of people, they avail it. But at the same time, many times in the parliament, I have raised this question, that currently the wages in NREGS is less than the minimum wages of many states. Doesn't it make a case that it should be increased at least till that level? Now, what happens? The central government says that if they want to give that, then let the state government give it from their own budget, but we are not going to give it. Now, all these, at the micro level fissures create not only problems in administration of that scheme, it also creates bottlenecks in actually giving a harmonized kind of a package to a person, as if you are going to give him a source of livelihood. Now, that is what the problem is. I think the solution is not in completely doing away with that scheme. But having said so, there are a huge number of schemes which just don't serve any purpose. Their objectives match or overlap with some other schemes which are also there. I mean, I still feel these employment schemes, there are so many of them, and I'm in the finance committee, and we keep looking at these schemes, Mudra, PMUI, so many are there. There are minor difference in each of these schemes. Now that creates problems, and that creates problems in even those people who are dispensing these schemes and these loan applications. The result is inefficiency and cost of administration going up, transaction cost going up. Now this is something that we have to and this is what I think the work which the Niti Aayog and the Planning Commission should be doing. How to, when you say, Honorable Prime Minister talks about ease of living, the ease of living actually essentially finally would come down to how do you decrease the cost of transaction, cost of living for getting any benefit. If I have to get a benefit of 1 kilo of rice, but I have to travel 7 kilometers to get that, it's not actually too good. So what happens? I ask a middleman to go and get it from him, and I set it up with the FPO. Now, these are the micro level issues which I think we need to address. Macro design is fine, but one size doesn't fit all, that we have discussed.
Wonderful. So as I still would like Dr. Saxena, last 1 minute for your concluding comments, although we have overshot by 2 minutes already. Dr. Saxena.
In fact, on NREGA, I would like to suggest that rather than increase wages, one should try to increase the number of days. Because today you find that on the whole, as against 100 days, it's only 35 days provided. And this 35 days varies a great deal. As I said, Bihar, it could be only 5 days. So in poorer states like Bihar or Orissa or UP, you calculate, it is much less. So what we need to do is, because if you compare NREGA wages with the actual wages which people are getting in other sectors, you find that wages are not increasing. Minimum wage may be high, but in the last, say, 10 years, rural unskilled workers' wages have not increased at all, increased very marginally. And therefore, NREGA is very important. But we need to really improve the implementation of NREGA in programs in states like UP, Assam, Bihar, Orissa, Madhya Pradesh, the poorer states.
Well, thank you so much. So this is all the time that we had for the book to be discussed. We would love to have many more sessions and including all of you there and much more, and a couple of panelists who are missing there today. We would like to fill that in. And with this, I congratulate Dr. Patnaik for having put together an excellent work, drawing from the wisdom of all the best authors, and then superimposing his own wisdom and the experiences that you gathered and very beautifully captured in those 4 case studies, which is what you put in the book. So thank you all once again for joining the discussion and making it lively.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing such rich discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
to all the panelists for having a look at my book and giving their very, very useful and interesting suggestions. And it provides me fodder to actually work on a second edition of the book. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.